Are you taking the digital SAT and wondering how you can get the best reading score ever? In this video, I'm going to talk through 3 really difficult reading questions. My name's Brooke. I've been coaching this test for like 2 decades or so. I have coached students to perfect scores on the exam. I scored perfectly as an adult on a previous version of the exam. I would love to help you crush the digital SAT. If you head to SupertutorTV.com, we have an awesome online digital SAT platform where you can get practice materials for the digital SAT. It is a one-stop turnkey solution for you. We've also got private tutoring and classes. I'm teaching a couple of super seminars, so if you're aiming for a super top score, these seminars are directed at people who feel like, you know what, I'm getting a 730 already. I want a 780 though. Are there a few tricks, tips, strategies that will really help me elevate my score? If you want to check that out, SupertutorTV.com/superseminar. I've also got a 6-week intensive, SupertutorTV.com/intensive, which is a 6-week class. And then we have essay coaching, lots of things, lots of resources for you guys. And if you want a free cheat sheet, you can download that on our website too, SupertutorTV.com/free resources. Okay, question number 1. I'm going to start off with a words and context question. Now, sometimes these questions are hard because of vocabulary, and I definitely recommend that you up your vocabulary, but sometimes they're hard not because the vocabulary is that hard, but maybe because of secondary meanings or complexities and things like that. And that's what this question is. It's kind of like a secondary meaning kind of question. Is also just the clues are not super distinct, right? Sometimes on these words and context questions, you can find the keyword, the keyword, the keyword, and you just circle the three keywords. You either need the same as or the opposite of, and you track through it. You find the best answer, you move on. This question's kind of weird. Economist Marco Castillo and colleagues showed that nuisance costs, the time and effort people must spend to make donations, reduce charitable giving. Charities can mitigate this effect by compensating donors for nuisance costs, but those costs, though variable, are largely blank, donation size. So, charities that compensate donors will likely favor attracting a few large donors over many small donors. So, a few ways that I can approach this. One thing is that I want to try to understand the question as much as possible whenever I have these words in context. The first thing that I need to do is comprehend. I need to understand what's going on and what would I anticipate maybe in this blank. And oftentimes I'm also going to look for what I call keywords, but this one, like I said, the keywords thing doesn't work as well. I really am going to sort of work through it with logic. So we've got some researchers and they say that this idea of nuisance costs, which is the time and effort people must spend to make donations, reduces charitable giving. So I'm just going to use my brain to try to understand what that means so that I can wrap my head around this whole problem. To me, a nuisance cost would be something like, if I have to donate to somebody, I have to put a check in an envelope and put a stamp on it, right? So my nuisance cost is I've got to pay for an envelope, I've got to pay for a stamp, and I got to drive myself to the post office or stick it in my mailbox and like stick it up sideways so the mailman gets it, something like that, right? That's one nuisance cost. Maybe another nuisance cost would be if I'm giving stuff to Goodwill, I have to stick all the stuff in my car and drive it over. Or if it's a couch or something, it might be too big for me to want to hire a truck to drive it over. So if you, Goodwill, give a truck that drives to my house and picks up my couch, okay, that's getting rid of my nuisance cost, right? Charities can mitigate this effect by compensating donors for nuisance costs, but those costs, though variable, are largely blank, donation size. So what it's saying is we can compensate donors for nuisance costs. So we can pay for your stamp or whatever, right? But those are largely blank donation size, so charities that compensate donors will likely favor attracting a few large donors over many small donors, meaning that it's not really worth it for charities to compensate donors who don't donate a lot for their nuisance costs, but maybe if they give a lot, then it's worth it for them to do it, right? So then what is probably the relationship between nuisance costs and the size of donations? If charities are like, I'll only do it if you're a really great donor, it probably means that they don't have anything to do with donation size, right? Or largely unrelated to, maybe that's my perfect answer, okay? So then I look down, okay, and we're gonna see, we have supplemental to, predictive of, independent of, or subsumed in. So supplemental to means it adds on to the donation size, but that doesn't really make sense that nuisance costs add on to the donation size, because nuisance costs are the cost of like the nuisance, not, that doesn't create more donation, that costs me more, right? And donation size is the idea if I give $1 million or if I give $5, right? If I give $5 paying for my stamp in my envelope, you had to front, you know, almost $1 probably to get my $5. That's not a very good deal for you. But if I give you $1 million, then that dollar you spent to give me an envelope is nothing, right? So I just want $1 million once. I only have to pay for one stamp. That's unrelated to, right? So supplemental to doesn't really make sense. Predictive of donation size. Those costs of variable are largely predictive of donation size. If they predicted the donation size, why would charities only want to favor a few large donors over lots of small donors? Why would that make them not want to accept donations from more people? It doesn't necessarily track with this or give me an explanation of that if they're predictive of donation size. Then we have independent of donation size. What does it mean if you're independent of donation size? And this is where the secondary meanings can kind of trip some of you guys up. Some of you might think independent is like, oh, I go out on my own and I don't need my parents' help. And you might think that makes no sense. How are costs independent, right? They're not like, oh, I don't need your help. That's weird. And so some of you are going to get rid of this because you don't understand the secondary meaning, but that's what makes it hard. And then we have subsumed in. So that means like buried in donation size. That doesn't even make sense that you have costs that are buried in the donation size. I don't even understand what that means. So we're going to get rid of that. Independent of, again, this meaning that it has, if something is independent of, it means it isn't influenced by it, right? So the idea of independent of is that idea that like, oh, like I have to pay for a stamp and an envelope if I'm mailing you a check, whether I give you $5 or whether I give you $1 million, right? That's free from outside control, not depending on another's authority. That's the one that you all know, right? But the definition we want is separate, not connected with each other. If two things are independent of each other, they don't influence each other. There's no cause and effect relationship, right? Independent of means the opposite of a cause-effect relationship. And that's the definition of independent of that we want here. And that's the closest that we can find to unrelated to. How could you have gotten this right if you weren't 100% sure of this secondary meaning of independent of? One thing you can do, right, after you comprehend. So one, we're going to comprehend as much as possible. Two, we're going to find our perfect word. And then after we find our perfect word, we're going to try to find what I call closest to perfect. And if we do that, we're going to have a better handle on unrelated to. Is that supplemental to? No. Predictive of? No. Subsumed in? Absolutely not. Independent of? I might be able to tell, even though it's a secondary definition, it might not be the way that you use independent of. If you do this perfect answer first and you look for what's closest to the answer I came up with, you might be able to get this right just because it vibes in this direction, right? And so sometimes that can save you, even if you don't know the secondary meaning. But again, we always want to be watching out for what a second meaning might be and making sure that that makes sense. Okay, we're going to look at the next one. This next question is a form, structure, and sense question. And I love form, structure, and sense because it's one of the easiest areas to improve on. If you have missed major points in that area, head on down to our online course, please, and like watch all the videos in there because it's one of these things that once you learn the rules, boom, you're good. And what I love about this question, it's a modifiers question. There's maybe 1 to 3 modifiers questions per test. Once you learn this rule, you guys, you never have to miss a modifiers question again. It's that simple. It's that easy. So simple rule, but technically a hard question because some of you guys don't know this rule. Despite being cheap, versatile, and easy to produce. So whenever we have an ing descriptor in an opening phrase on a sentence, whoever or whatever is being described by that ing word, which is called a participle, if you want to get into it. If you have a participial phrase, which is a phrase with a participle, after that comma, whoever or whatever is doing that action, described by that action, has to be right there. So despite being cheap, versatile, and easy to produce, blank, they are made from non-renewable petroleum, and most do not biodegrade in landfills. So, despite being cheap, versatile, and easy to produce, there are 2 problems associated with commercial plastics. So this is going to be wrong. Because after the comma, I have to have the word plastics. I cannot have there are 2 problems. I cannot have 2 problems are associated with. I cannot have a possessive. Commercial plastics 2 associated problems are that. It has to be commercial plastics. So if you know this rule, suddenly all these things that if you read these and plug these in, I'm not even giving them the time of day, you guys, because I know they're wrong. Because I know this modifiers rule. If I have a participle, an ing word, in a phrase, and what is a phrase? Well, I can't say, she was swimming, right? That's not a phrase, you guys, that's a clause, right? When I use an ing word with a helping verb, it becomes a main verb. So participles are kind of tricky because sometimes they're being used as part of a main verb. Sometimes they're even being used as what we call a gerund, which means they're a noun. So if I say like swimming is fun, this is like a noun, right? But this is phrasal use, despite being versatile and easy to produce, right? That being, ing word, that's a participle that's basically modifying this. It doesn't have subject verb. It's not a noun, right? Then we're on participle. And if it's a participle, whoever or whatever is being cheap, versatile, and easy to produce has to come after the comma. That thing that's easy to produce and versatile and cheap is plastic. I need plastic right after that, or commercial plastics. Have two associated problems, da 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 da, my colon. Colons are like a trumpet, I like to think. Cool, so there's the quick modifiers rule. If you want more practice, you know what I'm gonna say. You know where to go, SupertutorTV.com. Okay, so this next one is text structure and purpose, and it's a function question. So function questions, when you see what is the function, this is asking you what the purpose of a line or a sentence is. A few things with function. One, I'm going to read everything first. I'm going to try to figure out what purpose it is on my own, and then I'm going to look down, but I also am going to be aware that oftentimes on these function questions, I'm going to have to deal with abstract ideas, and I'm going to have to translate those abstracts into concretes. So if I tell you guys one quick rule on this, it's translate your abstracts into concretes. We're going to do that in a minute. Lily had no real intimacy with nature, but she had a passion for the appropriate and could be keenly sensitive to a scene, which was the fitting background of her own sensations. The landscape outspread below her seemed an enlargement of her present mood. Oh, this is the same idea, isn't it? It was a fitting background of her own sensations. It fit her present mood, and she found something of herself in its calmness, its breadth, and its long, free reaches. On the nearer slopes, the sugar maples wavered like pyres of light. Lower down was a massing of gray orchards, and here and there, the lingering green of an oak grove. So Lily wasn't a nature person, but if something was really fitting, if she really vibed with the nature thing, she would be into it, right? She could be keenly sensitive to a scene if it jived with how she felt. And then here's an example of that, right? So you see how what I'm trying to do, here's an example of that. That's like framework. That's the best way to think. Now, a lot of you aren't going to think that easily. I'm very trained at this. I've been doing this for a long time. I've scored perfect on a previous version of the SAT. I've coached students too. So yeah, I get it. Which choice best describes a function of the underlined sentence? It describes a detailed image of the physical setting of the scene. So a detailed image, what would that be? I'm going to turn my abstracts into concretes. That would be like the little whippoorwills. No, the details, the sugar maples wavered like powers of light, is the third sentence, not the underlined sentence. This is the wrong sentence, guys. It establishes that a character is experiencing an internal conflict. That's kind of weird. It makes an assertion that the next sentence then expands on. Now, this is what makes this one hard. The next sentence offers specific details, but I don't know if that's expanding on an assertion. It gives an example of, right? And again, I'm looking at my abstracts. I'm trying to figure out what would that be in concretes. In concretes, this is like the massive gray orchards is below. I don't know if it expands on it. It details the stuff to come. And then we have it illustrates an idea that is introduced in the previous sentence. And that to me seems best because in the previous sentence, it says that she could be, like in any situation, she could be keenly sensitive to a scene. And then this is a specific example of right now, this idea that she can be keenly sensitive to a scene. And if the sensations of her fit the mood of the place she's in, she can find some synergy there. And so this really is illustrating, meaning giving a specific example, i.e., a specific instance. Right now, the land's outspread before her. That's what's going on, right? That's the illustration. And I can kind of visualize it, right? She found something of herself, specific. And again, C is probably the second best. It makes an assertion that the next sentence then expands on. And it does kind of, but the assertion seems to be up here, right? This is more of an assertion. So an assertion, what is that? That's more of a claim. An assertion is she had a passion for the appropriate and could be keenly sensitive to the world around her. The landscape outspread below her seemed an enlargement of her present mood. And this is maybe giving an example of the environment, but it no longer is right. So what we're coming down to is what is an assertion, right? In concrete terms, an assertion is a claim. This is how things are, right? It seemed an enlargement of her present mood. And there seems to be a stronger relationship, like I said, that it's illustrating, oh, here's this, and then this is a specific interest. That seems more like this, versus it makes an assertion, and then the next sentence then expands on. If anything, the first sentence makes an assertion, and then we expand on that, right, or illustrate on that. And this is saying the landscape, it does say outspread below her, but that's the only part It then gets into the specifics of the landscape, but it doesn't say anything about her mood and the landscape being entwined. And so that idea of expanding on that, I don't know if it expands on all of it, right? It then kind of shifts to just detailing the specific context. And again, is that expanding on a single assertion, right? And I'm going back and forth. But you see, again, what I'm doing is I'm playing this game of abstract to concrete, and I'm trying to figure out in my mind which of these is closest to the best answer choice. The other thing that I like to say is, again, when I come up with my perfect answer first, that's probably, and I see a relationship between the information that's clear and more lucid, that's probably more likely to be the relationship, and I can frame this out in my own way. And again, if I framed it out in my own way, it's like they make a claim, then they give a specific instance of that claim, and then they further detail the context of this environment that this claim has been made in, right? So I can kind of do that and see that the best answer here is going to be D, okay? But a hard one, right? I hope you guys enjoyed this video, so please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet, and find us on social as well as at our website, SupertutorTV.com. If you are prepping for the digital SAT and need resources to do so, even if you're a self-prepper, we've got the material for you. Instead of buying 5 books, you can buy 1 course and get everything in one place. We let you import your Blue Book test. We let you customize your study list based on your Blue Book test results as well as your SuperTutor TV practice test results. So go check it out. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you soon.